Hello, my name is Mark Harris. I'm a doctor of naturopathic medicine in Bozeman, Montana, and this presentation is going to be talking about exercise. Now, exercise is really difficult to even define. We could exercise, we're doing things, but talking about fitness, there's many different opinions about what fitness is and how to define it. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about what fitness is and how to achieve it, and why a lot of traditional exercise advice that's been given is wrong. Now we're going to give some credit to the pioneers of this field, Ben Bocchicchio. In the 1930s, he brought a lot of this information out, but he didn't really understand why it worked, but he brought a very good exercise program out there. Then in the 1970s, Arthur Jones was the inventor of Nautilus fitness equipment, and he put that cam in to maintain muscles all through their range of motion. And then Ken Hastings used that information to kind of devise a very good exercise plan because of that. And then Doug McGuff helped with some of the physiology behind it, and then I'll introduce some new concepts today as well. So first off, as we're talking about fitness, we have to define fitness. And how do we do that? Well, we can talk about cardiovascular fitness, which is how well the heart works. And that would really be saying that the heart is the only important thing in fitness, but we also have every other cell in our body. And this used to be called aerobic exercise, but now we call it cardiovascular. Well, we can also talk about strength. How well your muscles are working and how strong they are. And a lot of people think these are two very big things. And then we talk about the flexibility of your muscles. Typically, as we go through each decade of life, we have less flexibility, but some people use that as a measure of biological age. And then we have balance. So these four things are important, but does that mean we have to do cardiovascular exercise for an hour every day? Strengthen our muscles 5 times a week, stretch for half an hour, and do balance exercises? We could do that, but then we'd be using perhaps 2-3 hours a day just to achieve fitness, yet we haven't really defined it yet. So now we have to think about a couple of things with exercise, and we'll go back to Phidippides. In 490 BC, Greece was at war with the Persians. And there was a battle about to be fought where there weren't enough soldiers for Greece. So Phidippides ran to Sparta to recruit more soldiers for the Battle of Marathon. He ran 150 miles in 24 hours, and the battle ensued, and it was won by Greece. Then he ran 26.2 miles from Marathon back to Athens to announce the victory. And this is where we get the term marathon for the 26.2-mile race that's run all over the place. This is where that term came from. So he got back there and was met with joy and wonder. Then he collapsed and died. So we have to think he was pretty fit to run 150 miles and then turn around and do 26 miles after that, but not too fit when you're dead. So now we look at Jim Fixx. In 1977, he wrote one of the most influential books in fitness called The Complete Book of Running, and we see his very fit legs on the cover. He wrote that in 1977, and it really started the running craze in America. 7 years after that, he went out for his daily run and died of a heart attack. So can we call him fit? Well, not when he's dead. So we haven't really defined fitness yet, because if a fitness that you're undergoing causes injury or death, then we can't say that's good fitness. Now, we can look at, as we're using running as an example, we can look at two types of runners. On the left of your screen, you see a fellow who's a track athlete, short distance, 100-meter sprinter. And the fellow on the right is a marathoner. Now, he's still alive, not like Phidippides. Of course, if Phidippides were still alive, he'd be 2,200 years old. Probably wouldn't be looking very good. Well, we see two different body types, and we see a very thin man who can run 26.2 miles and win. Now, we don't figure the fellow on the left could win a marathon, and the guy on the right probably couldn't win a sprint. But they're both great runners, but there's a difference in their muscles and their fitness. So we're going to explore this a bit more as we continue on. Now, when we talk about processes in the body, we have a term called anabolism or anabolic, and we've heard of anabolic steroids, what people often take to really build things up, but that isn't healthy. But we can build up stuff, or we have catabolism or catabolic processes of breaking down stuff. So typically we can build up muscle, we can build protein, and you see this fellow right here, look what happened to him in just 4 weeks, guaranteed. How about that? Well, I'm not sure about that. But anyway, then we can break things down, and we all remember the tale of Humpty Dumpty. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put him back together. So he was broken down, and this fellow over here was built up. So this is an ideal process where we build up things and break down things. Okay, so as we're building things, we have a nutrient that's very important, and this is perhaps the most important nutrient in the body. Now, many people will consider that perhaps calcium, maybe magnesium, all important nutrients, but this one is even more important, and that would be oxygen. Because if we talk about various foods, you could probably go 5 weeks without eating. You wouldn't feel very good after 5 weeks, but you'd still be around. You could go about 5 days without any water, and then the dehydration would probably kill you at that point, but 1-2 minutes with oxygen and you're just going to panic. So oxygen, once it gets inside your body, we have to see what we do with it. And then we'll be able to start approaching a good definition of fitness. Now, primarily, most of the energy that's used in the body is made inside your cells in an area called your mitochondria. Now, your mitochondria is where you utilize oxygen, and then from that, you can either burn down various things to make more energy, or you can build up things, proteins, muscles, hair, nails, skin, etc. And this is where it's used. And mitochondria are what really separate us from bacteria. Bacteria do not have mitochondria, and that's why they've never gotten any bigger than bacteria. Whereas a larger animal, depending on how big you are, you have mitochondria in your cells. And a very active place, like an active muscle, say like a heart, you have between 3,000 and 5,000 mitochondria per cell. And we can make more mitochondria, and our mitochondria can break down as well. So then to fuel our mitochondria, or to use fuel in our body, we have basically 2 fuels we can use. We can either use glucose or we can burn fat. Now, we'd like to be able to use these when they are necessary to be used, but a lot of people are not good at burning fat, but they're good at storing it. And then when we use fuel, we can make proteins, and that would be our muscles. We can make fats, and that would be our hormone organs. Our brains are mostly fat. Not that you're a fathead, but about 65% of our brains are fat. Not too much in the body is made of carbohydrate. And we get enough carbohydrate that will convert into fat and be stored. So in order to define fitness now, we're going to say it's our ability to utilize oxygen. The more oxygen we can use, the healthiest our cells are going to be. And that would include our heart cells, our muscle cells, our liver cells, our brain cells, every cell in your body. So we're not just limiting this to now cardiovascular. So getting oxygen to our mitochondria has various things that are necessary. We have to have good air supply. That means probably not a lot of polluted air. And just for instance, if you live in a rural area, oxygen is 21% of the air, where if you live in a city, it might be 16 to 18%. And then in times past, it was a bit higher. And the only way we can really know this is information we got from the pyramids of Egypt. Prior to opening pyramids, the chambers are sampled via airtight method to see what the conditions are inside the rooms. That way, if there's any documents or antiquities, they can place them in the museum and emulate those same conditions, and then the documents or artifacts do not degrade. And it was estimated back then, oxygen might have been as high as 38%. Perhaps that's why they were able to lift those heavy blocks and build pyramids. Won't really know. Okay, now once we get air into our body, our lungs are functioning. And here we have a problem with a lot of the way in which people breathe. A lot of people breathe into their chest, and that isn't an efficient use of getting air into your lungs. Now I'll ask you to place one hand on your abdomen, just under your ribs, and now take a big breath into your abdomen so your hand moves. And now you see that expanding and coming back down. Now place the second hand on your chest. And with this breath, first fill up your hand at your abdomen, then fill your hand at your chest, and you'll see what a big deep breath you get. As you release this, release from the chest first, and then from the abdomen. And you'll see if you're a chest breather only, you're not getting a lot of CO2 out of your system. So now you've got a decent air supply, and you've got a lung full of it, of good air. And of course, if you have a lung condition, if you have emphysema or you have asthma, this becomes more of a problem for you. Now, as we get the air to our lungs, we then push it to our heart. And if the heart is pumping well, and of course, if you're doing very good exercise, your heart pumps even better, we can get that oxygen into our arteries and into our blood. So the lungs oxygenate the blood, the heart pumps it to the arteries, which you can think of as pipes. You can think of the blood as water, the arteries as pipes. So now if we have any blockage in our pipes, like a cholesterol problem or an inflammatory problem, then we don't get the oxygen out of our blood very well. And this is a problem also if you have any CO2 in your body, then you can't carry as much oxygen. But let's assume that all the rest is working well, and now you know how to take a good deep breath. Then we get the oxygen into our mitochondria. But there's a couple other things that are important here. The mitochondria are surrounded by a membrane, two membranes, one on the outside, one on the inside, and these are made of essential fats. And if you have the wrong kind of fats, what we call trans fats or partially hydrogenated oils, then that will make these membranes too stiff and the oxygen has a much more difficult time getting out, and the byproducts have a much more difficult time getting out of the cells. So essential fatty acids, those from fish, from flax seeds, from evening primrose, those become so important to every cell in your body. And then this is also where thyroid hormone is important. This is where your thyroid hormone works in the membranes of your mitochondria and your cells. And as you'll see later, mitochondria help us burn fat. And when you burn energy, you are energetic. So that's why people who gain weight often think it's going to be the thyroid if that's a problem, but that's not the only problem, but it certainly can be one of the problems. Okay, so we get Mr. Oxygen as our superhero. Now we look at the mitochondria, you can see the cutaway, there's an outer membrane, and this is where some of the energy is done, and then there's an inner membrane with a whole bunch of dots inside. That's where most things are really going to take place in the body. So this becomes such an important area, and I said every single cell in your body has this. Now, we're going to talk about how you make energy in your mitochondria, and then from this information, we'll learn how to best exercise. Now, if we get into the beyond the outer cellular membrane, but not yet to the inner cellular membrane, you make small amounts of energy here. And we're going to call energy packets in a biochemical talk is called ATP or adenosine triphosphate, but we'll just call those two energy packets. Now, this isn't very efficient use of making energy, but we can do this very quickly. It recycles very quickly. Then we also make at this point 2 packets of fuel for further metabolism called pyruvate, and we can call those fuel. All right, so the fuel packet can go to one of 2 places. It can be used for further energy production, or it can get converted into lactic acid. Now, if you're a marathon fan, particularly the Boston Marathon, 18 miles into the race, there is what we call the wall. There's an uphill part, and a lot of runners get there. They start running that, and their legs start to hurt and ache with a lot of pain. And this is because of buildup of lactic acid. So when your muscles start to hurt, you know you have produced lactic acid. Now, lactic acid can slowly convert back to pyruvate, or it can go to another cycle, but it doesn't do that quickly. So if you get to a point of muscle burning, that's a good indicator of things that we're looking toward with this activity we're going to be describing. Okay, so in this first step, we're going to burn glucose or we're going to burn fat. If we burn glucose, we're going to make these 2 units of energy. Then if we bring this pyruvate molecule farther into what we call the Krebs cycle, part of your mitochondria, then we're going to use that same glucose and make 36 units of energy. Now, as we start burning fat, we're going to make 96 units of energy. So fat becomes the best fuel for energy production and energy utilization. So it's very good for storage and it's very good for use. So that is really why we have fat. There was a time prior to agriculture where we had a rainy season and a dry season. Rainy season, more food around. Eat it, burn it. Because you're more active, you're chasing game and doing kinds of things, whatever we did back then. And then comes dry season. Now there's not as much food around. There's not as much plant life. There's not as many animals. So a lot of the calories we eat then are going to be converted into fat because fat is a very good fuel supply. So it becomes very easy to store fat. But it's not that easy to utilize it once it's stored. And some of the exercises we'll be talking about help us do just that, and we're going to see why in some upcoming slides. So what we want to be able to do is make some muscles, and we don't really want to make fat. And you see that the fella in the lower picture probably isn't doing a whole lot of exercise. He's in that boat, the SS fat guy. And he looks like he's enjoying probably not a broccoli preparation. And his boat's kind of sinking, so he's not doing that good. So if we can maybe look like that polar bear bodybuilder, now we don't necessarily have to be muscle bound, but we don't have a whole lot of fat on that guy. For instance, you can see his six-pack. And really, everybody has a six-pack. But for some people, it's covered by fuel, which we're also calling fat. So the guy in the USS Fat Guy is hiding his six-pack pretty well. Okay, so when we're talking about glucose, after we eat a meal, we can store about 65 grams of glucose in our liver. And that energy is going to be used for the things we have to do for everyday activities. Walking around, holding things up. And then it gets burned up, and then at that point we're supposed to burn fat. But a lot of us are incapable of doing that, but there is a way we can do that better. Now in your muscles you have 200 grams of glucose. So it seems like it would be a good idea that you burned up your liver glucose and then you had a whole bunch more for the rest of your daily activities. But then we'd have no need to burn up fat. And the glucose in our muscles is designed to be used by the muscles. And the muscles at that point is just not available like liver glucose. The only way to use it is via intensive muscular activity. So we have some examples of how this goes. We'll get to that in a moment, but now we can talk about our fibers in our bodies, our muscle fibers. And some people have heard the term fast and slow twitch. Well, there are many more muscle twitch terms in biochemistry, but for our purposes, we're going to be calling it slow twitch, medium twitch, and fast twitch. And what this has to do is the ability of your muscles to contract and what speed they contract at or how efficiently they contract. So slow twitch muscles burn energy inefficiently. So that is what we talked about when you make 2 units of energy prior to the mitochondria. So you're going for a walk or a modest pace run, you're going to be using your slow twitch muscles. And these people now are using slow twitch muscles. They're standing, they haven't fallen down, so they're able to stand upright. She's got her thumbs up in the air and Smokey the Bear has one thumb up in the air. And in order to hold those arms up, they have to be using some energy. So they are constantly recycling this energy to make 2 units very quickly. Now we get into a point here as we get to our medium twitch muscles. Now we talked about as we get further into this exercise, we stack up this fuel that we called pyruvate. And as we stack this up, pyruvate can go to one of 2 directions. It can be made into lactic acid, and then we haven't really done too much for ourselves, or it can get pushed into further use of energy. And that's what we wish to do. So to get from slow to medium twitch muscles and then to ultimately fast twitch, we are going to have to do an exercise a certain way. So when we get to fast twitch, we burn our muscle glucose, and we can see this guy is running very fast. And he can do about 70 miles an hour, but he can't do it for very long. And really nobody can sprint for very long. And after he does that, you see that look on his face doesn't look too much like he's about to get up and do anything much else. So the point being here, when we've exercised to the point that we're going to be advocating, we're going to feel a bit like this cheetah on your lower right. And as we burn up our muscle glucose, we're going to have to then utilize energy somewhere else. And we're going to activate an enzyme called hormone-sensitive lipase. So the hormones from the exercise are going to stimulate this enzyme. And this enzyme is now what we call the rate-limiting step on your ability to burn fat. So now we get to the slide everybody's been waiting for, the biochemistry. So as we get to a walk or a slow run, we use our slow twitch muscles. That's the upper part of this chart where you see glycogen and glucose coming in. And then we feed that down, and you see in the lower part we have a little, it plays next to pyruvate that says 2 units of energy. And then we have that pyruvate or energy molecule down there at the bottom of that first box. Now that can get pushed over into lactate, but what we really want to do is put it and fuel it down to the second box. And from that box, we are then going to burn 36 units of energy. And now we're going to start burning the glucose in our muscles. So if we can take it from slow to medium twitch, meaning we've burned our glucose and made pyruvate, then we can take it into our next box, which we call various things called the citric acid cycle or the Krebs cycle or any number of other things. Then we can slowly utilize that energy over time for what we need and then keep using that to burn fat. Now, we have an additional thing that can happen with the glucose and the pyruvate if you convert to lactic acid. Now, the lactic acid can be sent back to your liver, reconverted into glucose, and sent back into that first part of your mitochondria. And this is what we talked about for the rapidly recycling 2 units of energy. Now, as you can see, on the right, in the yellow, there are 2 units of energy made, but in the left, it takes us 6 units of energy to make that. So now we have a net loss of energy. So we have to get fuel from somewhere. And if we're not burning fat at this point, we're going to break down protein to fuel this. So now the most available source of protein we're going to break down is our muscles. So you remember that marathon runner in the far right. Now he's going at a pretty good rate, but he is not going at the proper pace to get his muscles exhausted. He's doing it over 2 hours, and that's too long. So his muscles are wasting away, and that's why he's got the physique that he has. Whereas the fellow who's sprinting, his event is over in about 14 seconds. Now that is not ideal, but it's getting much closer to what our muscles need to get stronger and burn glucose better. And when we burn glucose, then we have more energy availability and need that is fueled and filled by burning of fat. So, hormone-sensitive lipase, what we call the rate-limiting step. So we have stored fat, and then hormone-sensitive lipase comes in and starts eating away at that fat so it can be used for energy. Now, there are many things that are important here. Your hormones are important. This would be cortisol from your adrenal glands, thyroid hormone we mentioned before. Then we talked about the essential fatty acids in your cells, the heavy metals. But even if that's all working perfectly, this enzyme, this yellow guy here, is going to determine how quickly we can release fat and use it for energy. Now, here it becomes important how we time moving from slow twitch to medium twitch to fast twitch fibers. So we can start burning fat, burn up all the glucose in our liver, but not start fueling our glucose and our energy needs with, with muscles, but then with fat. So the amount of timing that we spend in this exercise is approximately 90 to 220 seconds per major muscle group. Now, if you go less than 90 seconds, you haven't gone through all the 3 types of muscle fibers and you haven't stacked up the energy. If you go longer than this, then again, you haven't got the timing right to get to this third twitch and have it fueled from medium twitch and have that energy produced by slow twitch. So now we're going to talk about exercising your major muscle groups and how to do this. Now basically, when you are lifting weights at a prescribed rate, you are moving your muscles through slow, medium, and fast twitch. So the idea here is that you are moving weights slowly. This way, you are utilizing your muscles and you are not utilizing your tendons. If you utilize your tendons, you're at risk of injury. And as we talked about with Pheidippides and Jim Fixx, injury does not mean fitness. So what we want to do is do each exercise in 10 seconds forward and 10 seconds backward, meaning each direction of pushing or pulling. Now, we never want to get our arms or legs completely straight, because if we do, we're taking some strain off the muscles and then maintaining that weight with our bone structure, which is good, but it's not necessary for this exercise. So we want to move to full movement out in 10 seconds without locking out at all, then come back 10 seconds. And now that first rep has taken you 20 seconds. So we want to keep doing this until we get to the point of exhaustion. We cannot move that weight anymore. And at that point, your muscles are going to hurt because now you've gone back to producing some lactic acid, but now we've done it just the way we want to do it. So how many reps does this turn out? Well, if we got 20 seconds per rep, then we do 5 reps, we've now gone over the 90 seconds. So you should reach failure somewhere between 5 and 9 reps. Now, the thing you want to be careful of as you're extending your weight, you don't want to be having a jerky motion in the weight. Because then instead of a fluid motion that's working your muscles, you've got a lot of short stops and starts. Now, if that's the case, the first time you do this, then the weight you've selected is too difficult. And then if you're getting beyond 220 seconds and you're still doing this, then you've selected too light a weight. Now, it doesn't matter if you're 12 years old or 80 years old. You just pick the weight that works for you, that you can get to failure within 90 to 220 seconds. And then also, as you get to failure, the natural inclination at this point is just to release the weight as quickly as possible. Your muscles hurt, you're sweating, you're breathing hard, and you want to get this thing done with. But in that very last return to the resting position, that should be slow also. And that's where you're really going to make some major gains. Now we have 5 major muscle groups we talk about. First thing is the leg press or the squat. Now, for these kinds of exercises, unless you have a partner, free weights are not the way to go with this. Because if you're doing a squat and you get to failure 180 seconds into this, and you're halfway toward going up, what are you going to do with that weight? If you're doing a bench press and the weight is over you and you get to failure, your only choice is to drop the weight on your chest. So we have perhaps at this case, it's better to do machines, or if you have a friend that can be a spotter for you. But if you don't belong to a gym or have this available, it can be done with a Bowflex machine or Soloflex or various other home exercise pieces of equipment. But then we'll talk about a low-cost option as we get further into this. So the next exercise is going to be a low row, where you are grabbing a bar and pulling it toward your chest, just kind of toward the mid-chest, pulling slowly in, and then as you extend forward, not going to a complete straight elbow, because at that point, you are not supporting the weight with your muscles. So there's various machines. This one is demonstrated here. They have other ones that have handles you hold. They have cables like this. And there's a couple you can do bent over with dumbbells. that all work effectively. Now, after we've done a pull exercise, working all the muscles of the back, then we go to a push, working the muscles of the chest. And here's where we said that free weights can be dangerous if you're working by yourself. Now, a machine becomes more effective, and there's other ways we can do this also. So now again, you see this fellow's got his arms completely extended. So now his bones from his shoulders and his elbows and his wrists are supporting the weight. His muscles are not. So when you get to that full extension, you don't want to get fully extended. You want to have a little bit of crease in the elbow so that your muscles are under load for the entire time you're doing each exercise. Then the next exercise is an overhead pull down. So there are various cable devices that you can do this with. You could do it with a pull-up, but most people can't do pull-ups for 150 seconds. But there are other ways we can do this without a gym membership, which we'll be talking about after the next exercise we show you. So all these are the same in that you go each direction in 10 seconds. You don't lock your joints out in any direction. Typically you breathe in one direction, breathe out the other, usually one breath per distance. You can do two, but just caution you that as you get toward the latter parts is when it's becoming very difficult. The natural tendency is to hold our breath, but try not to do that at all. And then the last exercise we're going to do is the opposite of the pull down, is pushing up from the shoulders, or a shoulder press. Now this one can be done with dumbbells without a partner, because those can be dropped without dropping them on your head. Okay, now all this works great with the machines if you have a gym membership or you have a somewhat sophisticated home exercise device. But if you don't have those, then what you can do is you can use a simple latex band with a handle, and what you probably want to look for in these is one that you have adjustable bands. I mean, you can get heavier or lighter. And then the little black thing is a strap. You can attach it to a door frame so you can do pulling exercises. And then you can put it under your feet and do shoulder press. You can do one at a time. You can put up to your shoulders and do a squat. And of course, this is not going to fall on you and hurt you. And now you can do these exercises effectively. You just have to choose the correct weight of the bands so that you can work yourself to failure, and the same way we talked about, without a jerky motion, within 90 to 220 seconds. Okay, then after you've done this series of 5 exercises between 90 and 220 seconds, you spent 12 to 15 minutes doing this exercise. And ideally, you do not have any break between the exercises other than how long it takes you to set up the equipment for the next exercise. So now, doing this during recovery, after we've done this, we slowly and methodically keep the energy packet we call pyruvate moving into our cellular metabolism. So we're getting very efficient with our metabolism. Then we've burned up all the glucose in our muscles by bringing them to failure and feeling that pain. So we're going to resupply energy into our muscles, and it's going to take energy to do that. And now we become more sensitive to glucose and insulin. So this becomes very good for blood sugar regulation and even diabetes. And then as we have more energy needs, we're going to get to hormone-sensitive lipase, and we're going to release fat and use it for energy so that our muscles can be rebuilt from the exercise we just did. So basically, this is going to do, the rebuilding process is going to take time. And how long is that? Well, for many people, it's going to take between 5 days and 6 weeks. So how do you know how long it's taken you? Let's say you've done this exercise, and after maybe the second or third time, you kind of know exactly what weights you need. Then if you do it a week later and you are substantially weaker, let's say you can't push that weight as well as you did the previous week, that means your muscles haven't recovered yet. So maybe at that point you should wait 2 weeks. But ideally for most people, you're doing this 12 to 15 minute exercise once a week. Now, if we talk about the benefits of exercise, there are many. Energy, mental focus, heart attack, reduce osteoporosis, and this will all do that, these once a week. Cancer risk, strength, stamina, digestive Now, we go through a list of 50 things that you can read and don't have to have me read to you, but we get to the last two that I have in bold letters. And it talks about reducing depression and decreasing stress levels. My opinion is that the once a week this is the only place where this particular type of exercise does not shine. Because we need to do a bit more intensive exercise if we have emotional difficulties, exercise can be tremendous for them, but at this point we have to do them more frequently. Now, if you don't have to do this for the emotional well-being of it or the stress reduction well-being, then 12 minutes a week to 15 minutes a week, one session is all you need to do. But if you need more exercise, then we're going to talk about high intensity interval training. Now, this was originally called interval training, and it's become a new term called high intensity interval. But the classic example of this, if you were going out for a run, you might go for an hour run and every 20 minutes do a 15 or 20 second sprint. And each sprint was called an interval. But we didn't get very clear as to the science behind what timing of the interval was best. So then we have Dr. Izumi Tabata, who was working with the Japanese speed skating team. Now these people are in pretty good shape already, or they wouldn't be on the team. And this is a pretty intensive exercise, depending on if it's a short distance or a long distance. It's the equivalent of a sprint or a marathon. Now, he had them do exercise at 20-second all-out efforts, meaning at the end of 20 seconds, they should be collapsed on the floor. They take a 10-second break, and then they would repeat that 8 times. Now, this showed very effective, and people don't particularly like doing it. And then the other problem is you go to that exhaustion effort, now you've gotten to your fast twitch when you haven't replenished it yet. So this particular effort is a little too intense for doing these 5 exercises we've discussed. But the high intensity interval training, what has kind of come from this is that the 2-to-1 ratio is important. Whereas Tabata was doing a 2-to-1 being 20 seconds to 10 seconds, it could be really anything. You could do 30 seconds on, 15 seconds off, 1 minute on, 30 seconds off, etc. And I find for most of the exercises, it works very well to do 40 seconds on, 20 seconds off. That way each exercise takes you a minute. And then as you cycle through the exercises, the number of exercises you do is the amount of minutes you do this. And if you design these exercises in kind of different exercises, you won't have this boredom of doing just one at a time. And we'll give examples of some of these exercises, and then a lot of these are available on various websites, and I'll mention one that I like in just a moment. So we can add this in twice a week. Now you're going hard on these exercises, but you're not going to physical exhaustion. And what this works well for is making more pyruvate, but not further depleting your muscles when they haven't rebuilt yet. So this is effective at providing more fuel to your fat burning mechanisms. Now, examples we can do, and when I did this live, of course, I demonstrated all these exercises, but I can't do that for you here, but you can just look at any of these on YouTube and see how these are done. So we can do push-ups, mountain climbers, or what's called a reverse mountain climber, a push-up into a T position, combinations of push-ups, a squat or a squat with a jump. We can do stationary running pretty fast. We can do chin-ups, but most people don't like doing them. And this next one is an interesting one. It's called a plank, where you are sitting in a push-up position but on your forearms, and you hold that position for as long, perhaps up to a minute. And in order to do that, you have to keep your abdominal muscles very tight and engaged. So this is basically sit-ups without having to do a sit-up. But a plank is not that much fun to do either. And the world record for a plank is approximately an hour and 9 minutes, done by a 55-year-old guy. And perhaps that's something you could ascribe to, but even a minute doing that. Now, this exercise called a burpee is also called a squat thrust jump. And that will work every muscle in your body. Then we can do an extreme burpee where you're perhaps throwing that behind a chin-up bar. As you jump, you grab the chin-up bar, then you do a chin-up, then bring your knees up, and then that would be 1 rep. Now, a workout example that you would do 4 or 5 exercises. And as we talked about the 40 and 20-second interval, each one of these will take a minute. So here's 4 exercises, doing a push-up with a mountain climber, doing stationary running, doing a plank, and doing burpees. And you do 4 sets, and each one is 4 minutes. That took you 16 minutes. You do 3 sets, it took you 12 minutes. Either one is fine. And you may find the first time you do this, you'll only be able to do 1 set. So, but I want to stress this is not necessary for people who don't look for the emotional and stress relief benefit of exercise. So the ideal routine is doing the 5 exercises, and I have a little handout that you can download from the page from which you saw this video. And if you are looking for exercise for almost any benefit you can think of, for flexibility, for strength, for stamina, for blood sugar regulation, for longevity, for muscle building, and you will only build muscles to your potential. Unless you take a lot of illegal drugs, you're not going to become a bodybuilder, and nor are you going to be a gargantuan muscled woman or man unless you go to some not so healthy means to achieve that. But you will get as good as you can get, strong and good blood sugar regulation and good health. But if you are looking to add in something for your emotional well-being as well, you can add in a couple more high-intensity intervals throughout the week. So the ideal routine for most people is the 5 exercises once a week. 12 to 15 minutes is how long that took out of your week. More beneficial than running, because 80% of runners get hurt every year. And if you are hurt, you are not fit. And then if you are running, as soon as you stop the exercise, you stop the benefit, because you don't get into the fast twitch muscles. And then as we do various other exercises that have been kind of shown as popular, walking, EFX or the elliptical bicycles, treadmills, well, if you are only using your slow and medium twitch muscles, you are only fueling yourself via protein, and your muscles are going to get burned up from that process. So if you are losing muscle, it's probably from the low intensity exercise you are doing, and you don't have to eat more protein. You have to just change the way you exercise. And then how much protein do you need? Maybe 60 grams a day, which is not that much, and most Americans eat 120 grams a day. And that just becomes an acidic problem in your body, and that makes it more difficult to lose weight. So 45 to 60 grams of protein, either from animal or vegetable sources, is ideal for most people. Now, basically, this is the best form of exercise you can do. Again, my name is Mark Harris, naturopathic doctor and a diplomat of anti-aging health practitioners. I'm located in Bozeman, Montana. Now, my website is posted below. There's a lot of information on there, as well as the other parts of this video and a couple other videos of other lectures I have done, and watch them and learn some things about your health. And if there's just some things you absolutely have to ask me, do it either through my email or give me a call at the office. Well, thanks for taking the time to watch this, and I hope you've become more informed on your health and that you become healthier and healthier.